Absolutely. So welcome everybody, especially as people continue to trickle in. We are really excited to talk about our processes and how we manage client projects and communication and all of that stuff. Between the three of us, I did the math at one point, and we have like more than 2 decades of freelance experience, I feel like. So we are really seasoned at what we do and very eager to share. We also got a lot of questions for this workshop. I think we had over 60 total, so we are not going to get to all of them, but we will absolutely do the best we can in a round robin style. So we're going to start with intros about a little bit about who we are and the type of work, freelance work we do, and the type of clients we serve, and then we will dive directly into questions. So my name is Anna Burgess Yang. I have been freelancing definitely the shortest of everybody here. I have been freelancing for 3 years, freelancing full-time for a year. But I come from a product management background. I was a product manager for a long time. I work with mostly B2B fintech, financial technology companies. That's kind of my primary client. And I do content marketing and journalism. So I'm writing blog posts, ebooks, white papers, content that appears in publications. And most of my work is ad hoc. I do very, very few retainers. So as clients have something that they need from me, I am delivering it. And we'll talk more about that as we get into the questions about project management. And yeah, that's kind of the work that I do. So I'm going to popcorn it over to Lizzie.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to see everyone here and some familiar faces as well. I'm really excited to talk about systems and workflows and project management. As any of you who know me know, that's my jam. So I've been freelancing this is my 10th year now, full-time freelancing, and I work predominantly with B2B commerce and marketing companies. Most of my work is so on a month-to-month basis. I work with a lot of clients ongoing. It's not so much a retainer, but it's kind of, we have an agreed amount of pieces each month. And then I will also do ad hoc work in between, and mostly the ad hoc work is like landing pages, website copy, ebooks, white papers, and then the ongoing content is usually long form blog posts. So about 80% of my monthly work is made up of blog posts that are ongoing, and then the other 20% is kind of ad hoc landing pages and website copy. But I'm sure we'll get more into that when we answer your questions. So Sarah, I'll pass the baton to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Duran. I have been, how long has it been? I think 2024 will be my 9th year as a freelancer. And I really have like 2 sides of my business. So one side of my business is freelancing / consulting. I'm a project manager by trade, and I focus on a pretty specific niche these days. Although I have managed all different kinds of projects for people. But right now I focus mostly on large scale research projects for universities. So that's what I do as a freelancer. That takes up about 75% of my time. And then the other side of my business is a coaching business where I coach other freelancers and solopreneurs. And so in that aspect of my business, I'm running a podcast, and like these other 2 lovely ladies here, writing a lot of content and running a coaching program. And I think that's it. Those are the things, right? Okay.
Sure.
Do we want to move on to questions? So as Anna said, we got a lot of questions, not all of which fell under the category of project management. So we're going to focus on those first, the ones that kind of fall into the topic that we were going to cover today. And the way we're going to do this, maybe I'll just pop them into the chat so that everyone can see what we're working with. And we're just going to go in order and kind of answer the questions. Each one of us will answer the questions from our own perspective. So here's our first one, Anna, if you want to kick us off.
How do you know how much work you can take on in any given month? And that's always a hard thing to figure out, especially I think when you're new to freelancing. The way that I handle it is I can manage one long form thing per day. And I usually do those 4 days a week. So up to maybe 1,500 words. If it's longer than that, like an ebook, I'll plan multiple days that I need to work on that. So because most of my work is ad hoc, as client requests come in, I basically assign them to my next slot. So I know that I have 4 slots per week. I know how far out I'm booked. Because my work is ad hoc, clients know that they can't necessarily expect a particular delivery date from me. They know that it's subject to my availability. So I will drop it into my next slot and then let the client know this is the day that I'm going to deliver. By doing only 4 days per week, or 4 slots per week, I do have kind of a spillover day. So if something doesn't go as planned, my kid is sick, I'm sick, I'm not feeling it, it takes longer than I planned, I kind of do have this extra day where I could catch up if needed. That system has just worked well for me with the type of work that I do, and with most of my work being kind of in that 800 to 1,500 word range. So, Lizzie, how about you?
I'm actually very similar. So I call it the block method that I use, and I used to use Trello for this, but I now use Notion. And each piece that I write gets assigned a block in Notion, and I have 20 blocks per month. And if it's a longer project, then it will take up 2 or 3 blocks, depending on how long it will. If it's, say, for example, one block is 1,500 words, then the longer blocks will be a 3,000 word ebook, and they will take 2 days. And then about 2 weeks before the start of the month, I'll email my regular clients to get the briefs in for what they need me to work on the next month, and I'll immediately assign those to a block. And then if those blocks aren't full up, then as the month goes on, I can add in other ad hoc projects as it goes. But once those 20 blocks are used up, that means that I am at capacity and I have no more room to take on any more clients. So very, very similar to you, Anna, with that, in that respect. And Sarah, how about you?
I think that's so interesting because our work, I mean, I think both of your work is pretty similar, but mine is so different. So I think it's just, I'm also like taking notes, being like, I mean, I should be thinking about some of these things. So my work is like very structured very differently from I think both of yours, where most of my clients, actually all of my clients at this point, are long-term retainer clients. And so I have, at this point, I have contracted income through 2026 in some cases. And what that means for me is that my work, I have more like abrupt cliffs where I'm like, okay, as we get to mid 2025, I need to be thinking about filling up like where these other blocks are going to drop off. It also means that day to day, like, which I think we'll get into more, but it kind of feeds into this question, is like my work is more, which this might sort of be true for everyone to a certain extent, but like when I bring on a new client, I have like a much more intensive period at the beginning. And so that kind of dictates how many of those I can bring on. Like I'm not bringing on 5 new clients at one time. When I get to a project more to like past that like onboarding stage, then I'm able to think about how am I bringing on more. And I think the other answer to this, for me, at least in where I'm at in my business right now, is that I'm definitely bumping up against a ceiling where I'm bumping up against only what I can do. And so I'm also trying to think strategically going into 2024 about how I can start getting rid of some of the things that I shouldn't be doing. So I already have a VA, but I'm thinking about like, how can I increase her time? How do I think about like offloading some of this stuff so that I can bring on more clients and kind of like lift the ceiling up from where I'm bumping up against right now. Okay. The next question is about tools. So I'll put that in here. And there's a sub question to this, and I'll drop it in because whoever said this one, I like the way you phrased it. So there's the question, and here's one of the specific questions that came from the audience. So project management systems.
So what tools do we use and how do we set up an epic freelance project management system? So I use two tools primarily for project management. I use Airtable and I use Trello. Airtable is really my system of record and to keep track of not only the work that I'm delivering to clients, but how they get billed and things like that. So I have a Airtable form set up, which is kind of like a brief because I do not get consistent briefs from clients. Sometimes they're like, hey, here's a really detailed brief. And sometimes they're like, hey, can you write me a blog post on this topic? And so I will take whatever I'm given. It usually comes to me via email. I will drop it in the Airtable form. So it's in the format that I want. And then Zapier runs in the background and adds that to Trello, where I actually manage the project. I have Trello set up in different lists. I can see what client it's for, a link to the Google Doc of the brief if I got one, a link to the client style guide if there is one. So I kind of move assignments through different stages in Trello. As far as setting up a system, what I would contribute to that is I set up my system very early. Like once I had 2 clients, I was setting up a system. And what that did for me was when I made the leap from freelancing as a side hustle to freelancing full time, I had the system part already in place. What I built was scalable. It was going to work for 2 clients and it was going to work for the dozen clients that I now juggle. And so I'm not trying to catch up in terms of making my systems work as I have scaled. So that's what I'll say with setting up a system is to set it up early, figure out something that's going to work for you. And Lizzie.
Yeah, I wish I had that advice when I was starting out because I did not have any systems until about 5 years in, before I was just using Word documents and email threads, and you can imagine how messy that got. I now use Notion pretty much solely for all of my client management and project management stuff. I was using Trello, but I use Notion in a very similar way in that every new client I get, they get a like a page dedicated to themselves where I add the onboarding questionnaires, their content briefs, any information about invoicing, like who I need to invoice, their trading address, the price that we've agreed on, the signed contracts, they all go into this page for the client. And then when I'm assigned a new piece for them, I open up a block, which the piece gets assigned to, but then that will also link to the client card as well. So I've got all of the information, I can just click through into that. And then when I actually work in Google Docs, so that links to Notion as well. So everything is literally all in one card in Notion for every piece I need to write. And then when I'm working on each piece, that will go into draft in progress, and then it will be editing stage. Then it will be whether I've invoiced, whether it's been paid, and it will move through the system like that based on the tags that I've given it. So this works really well for me. It's the only system that I found that I can consistently use, and I've been using it for a while now. So it works. How about you, Sarah?
Okay, so this is the answer to this is a little bit different for me because I am like project management is like what I do for my clients. So to a certain extent, it's like the system I set up for my clients to manage their project is the system I use to manage their project. And while I do have tools that I use pretty consistently, I also want to make like a project, and I think this is true for us too, a project management system only works if you use it. And so that's why I think that there's questions popping up in the chat too about like, how do you know if it works? And I'm like, it works if you use it. If you're not using it, then you need to find something else, which is sort of the mantra I use for my clients too, because I've used, I actually do most of my planning in Google Suite. And so I build a lot of custom Google spreadsheets that I use to manage projects. I find that for my, like most of my clients are very comfortable with Google Suite. And so that is like a low bar for them to be able to actually interact with the system that I'm building for them. And that's primarily one of the main systems I use for myself. And then I also use Notion to manage my content strategy. For task management, I use this tool called Sensama. And I'll drop the link in, like I've been doing with some of these others in a second. And that's like a task, more of a task tracker, but it syncs with all kinds of other, syncs with Notion, it syncs with Trello, it syncs with Asana, or like whatever else you're using. So, and I guess the other thing, but this is probably like more for like large scale project management. The other tool that I really like is called Smartsheet, but it is something I think is more suited to like people that want to spend like a lot of money on something that if you're managing a huge project or a huge series of projects, that might be a good tool, but that's something I use more client facing. I'm trying to think of those. And I think then the other project management tools that I use that like might not be considered as project management tools is I use Slack. So I use Slack to both set reminders for myself and set reminders for the people that I work with. And I think we'll get more into automation maybe later too, but I think there's some other things around that maybe I'll share. Okay. Do we want, and sorry, we want to make sure that we're getting to as many of the questions that people submitted ahead of time as possible. So to the extent we can, we'll also answer your questions that you're dropping into the chat, but we'll also be keeping the chat afterwards to think about if there's any kind of like follow-up thing we want to do after this, we'll hold on to those questions. So the next one on our list is, okay, here we go. This one also I'll put in the kind of the summation question and then like a sub question that's just phrased slightly differently.
So how do we manage project timelines and scope changes? And how do we handle it when clients give us something later than planned and that disrupts our schedule? So because most of my work is ad hoc, I don't give clients a spot until I have a brief. And so they cannot tell me, hey, I'm going to give you 2 articles this month, and I put them on my blocks and then they don't get me the thing as planned. I will not give them a block until I have a brief. That works most of the time. The one exception to that is I do a lot of interviewing for my work because I do some journalism work and because I do a lot of thought leadership where I am interviewing a subject matter expert for an article. And so sometimes I will get a brief and then have trouble scheduling a subject matter expert to, getting some time with them on the calendar. In those cases, it depends on the client. If it's kind of I want to say mediocre client, they will just have to move to my next block. Like I'm not willing to work outside of my normal hours or anything like that to make something happen. They just kind of have to understand that it is subject to getting an interview scheduled. If it's a really great client and I want to make them happy because I have that spillover in my week that I only schedule for, if something does happen and I really want to make the client happy, I will tuck them into that extra spot or maybe try to fit them over the course of a few days to try to get that thing delivered. Scope changes, it doesn't happen to me a ton. Usually I know ahead of time exactly what the project is supposed to be and what the length, most of my work is based on the length of the project. And so there isn't a ton of ways that clients can scope creep on me. But if something, for example, they said, hey, it's supposed to be 1,000 words and now we want 2,000, that's a different length of time that I have to commit. And so I have to go back to them and say, well, you're going to have to pick, like, do you want the original date or do you want this new date that's going to allow for that? So Lizzie, how about you?
Yeah, because I think we work in a similar way in that our schedules are quite flexible. We're not tied to specific dates, and I always plot my timelines a lot later than they need to be. So if a deadline is the end of the month, I'll put it in my calendar as it needs to be done a week earlier. So I've got that extra time if anything does come up. And with the block method that I use, it's quite easy to move things around with the looser timelines and deadlines. It just means that I'll swap another piece out that day that I have got a brief for, that I am ready to go on, for the piece that is not ready. But like Anna, a piece doesn't go into a block unless it's got a content brief to go with it, and it's officially been assigned. I've had clients say to me, yeah, we want you to write 2 pieces next month. Can you hold this space? And I say, yeah, sure. Once I've got the content brief, then I can hold the space for you. But until that point, it's fair game. And these blocks are open for on a first come, first serve basis. In terms of scope changes, I send a proposal before we start working together with the terms of kind of the engagement. And then the content brief is, I always ask clients for quite a detailed content brief. And if they don't have the time to supply it, or they just send me like a 1-line response, I will write the content brief for them and charge them accordingly for it, and send them and get that approved before I officially start working, so that I'm not writing a draft and handing it in and they're saying this isn't what we wanted. So I've learnt the hard way, because many times in the past, before getting a detailed content brief or setting the terms of agreement in a proposal, I would have clients, I'd spend 2 days writing a piece, and I've had clients say, oh, this isn't quite what we wanted. We thought we were going to go from this angle, even though they didn't say that, because I'm not a mind reader. None of us are mind readers. So my process is really like nail down the details before you get started. Do not get started without a detailed content brief, and it won't go in my calendar until I've got that detailed content brief, so that I can plan everything out. And I think, yeah, that's how I do it. How about you, Sarah?
So mine is, again, I think mine is more like I'm managing a project for a client, and so the timeline is like the timeline of their project, which in the sort of time scale that I'm of the projects that I'm managing, I always map things out in phases, because I think what others are hitting on here is we're not mind readers. We don't know when that's there. In my line of work, I don't know what the next phase is going to look like until I do the first phase. So it's very much like an agile project management strategy where we're running in sprints. And then, so for instance, at this point, I'm about halfway through a 6-year contract. When I first scoped out that contract, I scoped out year 1, and I signed a contract for year 1, because I was like, I don't know what my life is going to be like in 6 years. I don't even know if I like you people yet. I don't know what this project is going to look like. So let's say we're going to do this for a year, see how it goes, and then we'll scope out, another set. And I've done that now with that particular project about 3 times. So as things change, I'm going back to them saying, hey, you want to add, this line of work, that's going to be a scope change, which is going to be a budget change. And I've done that in a long-term project about 3 times now. And I think the through line for me, from what both Anna and Lizzie are saying, is like this thing around boundaries, which you learn, like Lizzie, you're saying, like retrospectively, you learn in the beginning, you're like, oh, I never would have known to like draw this line or ask for this thing up front, or like get this piece of information, until you sort of learn the hard way what happens along the way. And so that is absolutely true for me too. I've definitely learned, like in my scopes, what I do and what I don't do, and having sort of like boundaries around that. Like, I am not here to be the person that goes out and schedules all of your interviews. I'm the person that is going to train the person that goes out and schedules all of your interviews. And if you don't hire that person, then you're not going to get your interview scheduled. So I think boundaries is definitely a big one for all of us. Let me grab the next question.
How do you maintain and archive old projects? So every client I have has a folder in Google Drive. And so in that folder, there are subfolders, one for agreements, one for drafts, my version, one for collaboration, which is their version. And then things like, interview transcripts and other resources. And so when I am done working, and I maintain a client list in Airtable, So when a client is done, like I'm pretty sure they're not going to come back. It's never a guarantee because sometimes they do come back, but I will archive the entire, not archive. In my Google Drive, I have a folder that says Z archive so that it's at the bottom of my list alphabetically. I will take the client's entire folder and drop it into Z archive. So I don't have to look at it anymore. But because the collaboration folder is shared with the client, they could still access it if they needed to. I mean, it's their work. They paid for it. The only time I revoke access is if for some reason they didn't pay me, which has happened once or twice. Then I remove their access. I'm like, you don't get this anymore. You didn't pay for it. But otherwise, basically, it's just keeping my Google Drive clean to clients that are active. And then in Airtable, I have a flag that's just a check mark, active or inactive. So if I can just uncheck that, and that keeps my Airtable clean as well. And Lizzie.
Yeah, very similar. Each client gets a folder in Google Drive. I'm not as organized as you with the Z archive, but I have a folder that's for past clients, and all of the folders go in there. On Notion, I have the option once I've finished, this is on a piece basis rather than a client basis, I can archive each piece, and that goes, it comes out of my kind of current setup and goes into another page where it's just a long list of past projects, where it's kind of organized by title and client. I can filter it by client. So, and that's just internally facing though. So if I need to find a piece that, I don't know, has been taken off their website, but I want to see it at some point, or send it to another prospective client, I can search through my archive folder filtered by the client in Notion to find that. But otherwise, everything else is in Google Drive, and that's the folder that the clients have access to as well. Because like Anna said, if they want to access the pieces that we've worked on, they're still there as well. And Sarah?
I mean, actually, in this instance, mine is exactly the same as both of yours. I manage everything in Google Drive, and when I'm done with the project, I just move their Google Drive folder to the old, mine is old, the folder, and put it in there. Okay, here's the next question.
How do you encourage clients to come along for the ride and stick with it in terms of how we manage projects? So I actually,
sorry to interrupt you. Here's a good sub question too. That just helps with a little bit of extra.
Yep, and how much of your in-client internal stuff do we expose to clients? So for me, it's very much case by case. And I will use a client's project management tool if they want me to. So I am in clients Asana. I've been in clients Notion. I'm not going to mess with their system if they have a system in place for managing their work. If they want access to kind of how I manage their work, because I use Trello, I will create a separate Trello board for their work. But because I want to see everything, all of their work in one place, there's a Trello add-on called Unito, UNITO, I'll type that in the chat, that I do pay for on top of Trello. And it syncs cards between the main board and the client's board. So then I can keep everything in one place, but then those specific cards are linked to the client's board. So I can make like a change to a due date on my board and they'll see it on their board. I only have one client that's doing that right now. He really wanted that he didn't have a system in place and kind of wanted to use mine, but obviously I can't expose like all of my clients to him, and I didn't want to change what was working really well for me, which was to have all of my clients on a single board. So by using this kind of intermediary piece in Trello, I was able to do that. And Lizzie.
That's really interesting. I'm going to have to check that out, because I like the idea of having one for you and then one for the clients. So yeah, I'm the same. If a client already has a process or a system set up and they're working with other freelancers within that system, I'm happy to get embedded in that. I'm on clients' Asanas, Trellos, etc. But I also still create my own internal board for that client as well. That sometimes adds another step to the process, but it helps me organize things anyway. And obviously I want to make my clients' lives as easy as possible. So it's just easier if I fit in with their systems. The only non-negotiable that I have is the onboarding process that I go through is that, I mean, it's just some simple templates on Google Docs, but it gives me all of the information I need to get started. And I don't make clients do that, but I ask them to do that before we get started so that I've got everything I need. And I get them to come along for the ride with that by saying that it's going to help me do my job better, basically, if they give me that information up front. And it means that we can have more hands-off communication throughout the duration of us working together, because I'm not going to be constantly checking in, asking them questions. And then those documents, those templates that they answer get put into the client page that I have on Notion. So I've got all of that information readily available. Over to you, Sarah.
So because my role is to like build a project management system for a client, in most cases, if they have an existing system, which is almost never for the people that I work with, if they have an existing system, I will help them optimize their system if it is the right system. If I'm like, this is a terrible system, you're dropping balls all the time, we have to start over from scratch, then that's what I will do. And I think for me, like I said in the beginning, the biggest thing as a project manager, as an external project manager for other people, is I'm sort of building a comprehensive system, which I think touches on what you're both saying too, that holds everything. So it holds everything for their project, all of the minutia, all of the details, so that I know that it's all there. But really, I'm the only person that ever looks at that. And so part of my role for my clients is filtering that information in some way so that they have the level of information that they need. And sometimes that means the level of information they need in terms of like, I need you to do these 5 things by the end of the week, or the level of information they need where it's like, you have me running 3 different projects for you, and you want to be able to look at a glance and see that things are on track. And so in the tools that I use, like I said, in Google Sheets, I build a lot of like custom planning tools, which include dashboards that kind of bring out some of those things. That's something that I have done in Smartsheet and other places like that. Or if folks that I work with who are using something like Asana, it's really just helping them think through, like, what is the level of information that you actually need about this project? What is the information that like the people on your team need about this project? And then I'm sort of the one that's like managing the overarching. But if they, like I said, if they don't use it, I've built many, many fancy project management systems for people that never get used. And so that's why it's like, I will always default to a system that they feel comfortable with, as opposed to being like, hey, this thing is actually going to be way better. But if they're never going to use it, then it doesn't matter. And I think one of the things that I use to do that too is, I think Anna mentioned Zapier at the beginning. I can do like pretty much almost anything in a Google spreadsheet connected to Zapier, connected to something else if I have to. And so I think it's also part of my role is just building them a system that they can use and understand and gives them the right level of information. Okay, here's our next one, which is about communication.
How do we manage communication channels for different clients? Like with project management, I will use whatever they have. So I am in multiple clients' Slack channels. I get emails, I get tags in Asana for communication. It's a lot. What I do is I have everything come into me via email. So I'll have Slack set up to send me email notifications when I'm tagged or anything like that. I am actually in a couple of clients' emails, like I have an email address on their domain. I will set up a forward so it comes into my email. It just basically all has to land in my inbox. I can't check multiple Slack channels randomly during the day. I can't check multiple email addresses. So I have to have it all land in one place. The only way I can do that is basically by forwarding, automating, sending notifications, something to my primary business email. And then that at least tells me, oh, okay, now I have to go to Asana, or I have to go to their Slack channel or whatever and reply. So I'll still use whatever communication tool they have, but I manage it all in my email. Lizzie.
Same. One thing I don't do anymore is I don't have email addresses on clients' domains. There was a few clients I had when I first started out that wanted that, and I just missed so much stuff, and it was just a nightmare, like logging out and logging back in. Didn't think to forward them to my actual inbox, so top tip there. But I will use whatever communications channel they're using. Most of my clients tend to use Slack, so that's kind of the predominant way that I communicate with clients, which is fine for me because I'll just open Slack in the morning and I can see what notifications I've got. And like Anna does, I've set it up so that I get email notifications when I'm tagged in a Slack message as well. So I know to check it if I'm pinged. I don't think at the moment I'm using any other communications channels with clients. It's predominantly just Slack and email, and that seems to work well for me. I know there was a time where with some clients it was Trello, with others Asana, and I was just getting pings from all sorts of different places in it, and it felt like a bit of a nightmare. So yeah, I try to keep it to Slack and email unless a client really wants to communicate in another way. Sarah, how about you?
So a lot of it is very similar. I have a Slack channel. I think for each of my big clients, I have a separate Slack channel that's like their Slack. And then I do have, I'm trying to count. I have 3 inboxes for different clients. And then I also have 3 different inboxes for my own business where I like parse out the different types of communications and the different people that need to be involved in those for the coaching work that I do. I use this tool, which I'll drop in the chat, for organizing my multiple inboxes. It was a huge game changer. Like it basically, I don't know if it works with, I use it with Gmail. I don't know if it works with non-Gmail, but I used to have it so that the other tool that I use is my like browser home tab. So when I open my browser first thing in the morning, I have a series of home tabs up there that are basically like my reminder to check these things first thing in the morning. And that used to be that it was like 4 email accounts and like 2 Google Drives. And it just became completely unmanageable. I think Shift had an error early this year, and I had to start checking my email in my browser again. And I was like, oh my, like I can't, like I'm so used to doing it in Shift now. So that's one way that I manage the multiple inboxes. I do think it's like what you're saying, Anna, is like condensing it all into one communication stream, I think is so true, that like even if people are using different things, thinking about whether it's like that tool that Anna mentioned or like Zapier or something where it's like, even if they want you to be in their system, how can you like bring their system into your system so that everything's in one place so that you're not dropping balls? But that is like, I think the main thing. And then I think the other thing, which like we're sort of touching on here, is also around boundaries, where it's like, the inboxes that I have for my clients are not inboxes on their domains. It's like generic emails that I've set up to manage their project. I also don't do emails at other people's domains anymore, mostly because the instances in which I did that, it made it look like I was an employee of their company, which is not what I am. And it projected the wrong image when I was interacting with people externally, where I like sort of wasn't allowed to say that I was a contractor and a business owner in my own right. So I don't do that anymore. And I'm trying to think, there's not instances now where I'm like in other people's like project management systems either, in terms of like communication there. So I think my big ones are email and Slack. Oh, that's the other thing I was going to say about Slack, is just the boundaries. Like Anna, yours going into your email, let's have very like hard notification boundaries around my Slack, or it's like that it doesn't notify me before or after certain times, or I turn it off when I'm on vacation or something like that. Okay.
I want to quickly add one more thing to communication, and that's notifications from Google Docs. If you're a writer or you're collaborating, It's overwhelming, especially if you have multiple stakeholders all commenting on things and it's coming in at different times. So one thing I do is I send everything directly to archive. I do not look at them ever. I tell clients to ping me back when they're done. When they're ready for me to look at it, just let me know. It keeps my inbox so much tamer than the hundreds of notifications that I would otherwise receive from clients. So that's another way that I streamline my communication.
Yeah, I mean, notifications in general, but I started getting
Yeah.
notifications on something else this morning. And I was like, how do I turn that off? Oh, it's like Otter AI. It's like this.
Yeah,
Otter
I think
during your meeting. I was like, I don't need to know that.
yeah. So I think like controlling what notification, like I want like controlling what notifications you get to if you're getting them all in one place, what are you getting so that it's not overwhelming?
Yes. Here's the next question.
How do you break down tasks to optimize your time? So I do not track a lot of tasks related to my deliverables for clients, like a subtask. I just don't. Lizzie mentioned, for example, writing, editing, things like that. For me, I don't track that. I basically track if there's an outline that is due to the client, that would be one thing. If there's interviews that I need to schedule, that would be another thing. But otherwise, I'm only really tracking like when is the due date. So for optimizing my time, I kind of have a pretty good idea of how long it takes me to write an article and how much research time I need. So I'm slotting those into my blocks. So maybe a couple days before, I'll have a little time set aside to do a rough outline for myself or do some research. And then on the day that I plan to write on it, a chunk of time in the morning and maybe again in the early afternoon to work on that article. Unless it's something that's longer, I work on almost everything in a single day. That way I'm not bouncing back and forth I'm not context switching, right? Like I'm not bouncing between this, working on this article and then working on another article and doing this piece and this piece. I'm trying to keep it all in one day. So I'm stay very much in the right space. So that optimizes my time just because I can stay really focused on that piece that day. Lizzie.
Yeah, again, very similar. So I do most of my writing in the morning. That's my most productive writing time. And then the afternoons will be smaller tasks like writing a content brief if that needs to be done, making edits on a piece, sending emails, invoices, all like the kind of bitty stuff that needs to be done, but doesn't really take a lot of time. And protecting my mornings in that way means that I can, like Anna does, write a piece in a day so that I'm not spreading it across multiple days, because I really, really struggle with context switching. My brain just doesn't kind of facilitate that. So once I'm writing, I need to be writing and I need to be focused. But I will, so once I get a content brief in, I will check it over immediately so that I can check all the links are working. I can see if I have any questions, because I have been burnt in the past, my own fault entirely, by not checking if I've got access to certain documents that come with the brief, or if I need to speak to certain people and then it will come to the day of writing it and I'm like, oh crap, I didn't do the stuff that I need to be able to write the piece. So now whenever I get a content brief through, kind of whenever that is, I will take a look at it immediately and won't kind of assign that to a specific day. But everything else, the writing is in the morning and then the smaller tasks are in the afternoon. And I just find that is the way that I work best. So I guess that's me optimizing my time to make the most of when I'm productive. And Sarah, over to you.
So yeah, I think when you both said context switching, that's something that I've been thinking about like a lot over the last year or so. Is just like, how am I organizing, which is like related to this question, but I think for me it's more about like, how am I organizing my calendar and organizing my time so that I'm focusing on the things that are specific to one client or the same thing that I'm doing across multiple clients so that I'm minimizing that context switching as much as possible. I also I have, for the clients that I work with, there's to some extent for all of them, there's things that happen repeatedly every week or every month. And so I always do those things. And I have those very clearly on my calendar, every Monday, I'm setting out meeting agendas, I'm checking project plans. And then there's things that are more phase specific based on the phase of the project that we're in. And so those things, I mean, basically everything lives on my calendar. So I will whether it's the work I do for my clients or whether I'm building out a new product or service in my own business, I make a legitimate project plan for it. And then I put every single piece of it either in my task tracker if it's small, or on my calendar if it's more than 30 minutes. Then everything lives on my calendar in a block. And then I'm moving those blocks around, because sometimes, I think Annie said this in the beginning, maybe I'm I have to write that thing this week, but I don't feel like doing that right now. So I'm going to move it over here, move this other thing back over here. So there's a lot of moving of blocks throughout the week. But the blocks are what make sure that everything gets done.
We all time block.
We're onto something.
Okay, let me see. Let's go with this one, because I know we're going to start bumping up against time here.
How do you manage multiple clients? So at any given time, I probably have a dozen or so active clients. Because my work is ad hoc, there are some that literally will come to me once every 2 months or something like that, because they have, it's a journalistic publication and they just come when they have something. And so I have had clients that I thought were gone and then they just reappear out of nowhere. So in Airtable, which is my kind of source of truth, that's where I have all of my clients listed. I have all of their payment terms. So if it's net 15, net 30, do I send the invoice to my contact? Do I send the invoice to their boss? Do I send it to accounts payable at thisclient.com? I have a link to their style guide if they have one. So I'll tuck that into Airtable as well. And so when they give me a new assignment, which comes in, which I fill out that form in Airtable, in the background, what Zapier does is it pulls in all the rest of that information. So it pulls in a copy of their style guide, it pulls in their payment terms and stuff, and it drops it into the Google Doc for me. So that when I'm working on that specific deliverable, I can simultaneously see their client information. And then, like I mentioned, every client has a folder in Google Drive. When I take on a new client, Zapier also sets that up. So every client has identical folders named the exact same thing. So that way it's really kind of easy for me to know, okay, where would I put this? Where would I put a draft? Where does the copy of the contract go? So there's still some context switching going on in that, every client is different and every style guide is different. So I kind of have to review that information as I'm preparing to deliver a draft. But because I'm pulling that in through Zapier and dropping it right in the Google Doc, I'm not going to multiple places to try to figure that out or quickly review it and things like that. So it's a combination of Airtable, my system for clients, and then the actual Google Doc that I'm working from. So Lizzie.
Yeah, so I manage all of my clients in Notion. Like Anna, I'm working with usually around 10 on average clients, active clients at any one time. So some of those will be 4 pieces a month, some of them will be 1 piece a quarter. And what I do in Notion is I have a list of them all going along the top, so I can see the drop downs of what projects we've got on the go with each client. And I can filter it by client, but for me it's nice to have a big picture view of how many projects I have on the horizon, how many clients I'm working with at the time. Even if there's no projects that we're currently working on, they'll stay in that until it's been 6 months, because like Anne said, they do come back out of the woodwork quite more often than I thought they would. And then in each of those cards, I've got all of the information about the client. So like I said before, I've got the signed contracts, I've got the invoicing information, I've got my contact details, I've got style guides, any documents that I need to work on those pieces. So everything is kept in Notion there. With invoicing, I do the same invoicing process with every client. So I invoice at the end of the month. So that's just an end of the month job for me, but that will also go into Notion when I've sent the invoice and when it's been paid. So basically I can see everything that's going on with every client at any given time in Notion. So yeah, that's how I do it. Sarah.
So I'm trying to think of how many clients I have right now. So on the like consulting side of my business, I have 5 clients. And then there's like the infrastructure that runs the like content and coaching side of my business. And so for my client facing work, I basically have like triggers of what I know I need to do for them. And a lot of it, I think, goes back to the answer to the previous question about like, how are we grouping things to avoid context switching and stuff like that. So I have like, I know the things that I have to do for each of my clients every week because I've mapped it out very carefully. And then I go like each time we start a new phase of a project, I'm then going back in and like remapping out like, okay, what do I need to do over the next 6 months to be managing this thing? And then where does that live? Does it live in, am I putting that in like my task tracker that's like connected to an overarching project plan? Am I putting it as a calendar, like a recurring calendar block? The other thing that I use to manage multiple clients, which may not be the right thing depending on the type of work that y'all do, but for most of my clients, I have a regular reoccurring meeting with them. And that obviously is like probably not a thing if like you're ad hoc writing pieces for them. But for my folks, I have to have like a checkpoint with them at a regular interval. For my bigger clients, that means that I have a reoccurring meeting with them every week. For some of them, I have a reoccurring meeting every other week. And so that's something that I use to sort of drive the work forward because like I was mentioning before, they're not always engaging in the project management systems that I have. Or I need to be able to be like, hey, there are these 5 things that need to be done, or these 5 things that I need feedback on. And so the regular meeting cadence with my clients is another thing that I use to always drive that work forward, with a Google Doc agenda that I use as one of my project management tools. So every Monday I'm building the agendas for the week ahead, thinking about what I need to be talking to my clients about in order to move the work forward. Okay, let's do one more. And then I just want to save us a little bit of time right at the end for each of us to talk about if we have any upcoming things that folks should know about. Trying to think of one that, I mean, I think this one is sort of related to the ones that we've already been talking about, but it might be taking it up to a slightly higher level.
How do you deliver maximum value to clients without overwhelming yourself? Keep the peace and keep my boundaries is kind of my main mantra as a freelancer. I will very rarely go outside of scope. I'm not into delivering them something extra so that they feel like I'm more valuable or anything like that. So basically the maximum value is what they're paid for. And they know what they're paying for when they're signing up with me. Because of that, I'm very careful. I will let them know if something they've asked me to do is not in scope. And so I guess my answer to that is having it in the contract up front. That's how I can deliver maximum value without overwhelming myself, is not letting things go above scope. Lizzie.
Yeah, same. So it's all in the onboarding process for me. So to deliver maximum value, I need the onboarding process to be smooth. I need to have all of the information that I need to do my job properly. And also that stops me from getting overwhelmed, because I'm not like, okay, I don't know how to do this because I haven't got this information. I've got everything that I need. I'm the same as Anna. I will very rarely go over scope unless I really like the client and it's something small. But the value is in, it's in what they're paying me for. And that's laid out very clearly in the proposal up front and all of the documents I get, so that I'm able to do the best job that I possibly can, without feeling like I need to be on the phone to them all the time asking things. So and also set working hours. I work set hours. I don't work the weekends. I never work any evenings. I don't work on Fridays, and I'm very upfront with clients about that as well. So I think it's really important to set those time-based boundaries as well, so that you've got that space away from your desk to not get overwhelmed, because we don't want it to become our entire lives. Sarah, how about you?
So the type of work that I do, scope creep, is just a reality, because like I said, I don't necessarily know upfront everything that it's going to take to execute a given project. And so for me, I think my answer to that is that I have to be very vigilant about focusing on the work that only I can do. And that doesn't mean that the work that all the other work that needs to get done doesn't get done, but I'm sort of proactively internally coaching myself and also coaching my clients about, like, is that really the thing that I should be doing, or do we need to figure out how to automate that, or how to have someone else on your team do that, or a lot of those other types of options? Because I think it's very easy for me to get pulled into, like, it would only take me 2 minutes to schedule these interviews, but is that really the thing that I should be doing? It is not the thing that I should be doing. And so that sort of evolves for me over time. For sure, in the scopes of work that I do, I think I get tighter and tighter every time I do a scope of work about, like, this is what I do, this is what I don't do, this is how I'm going to help you figure out how to get all the other things done that I don't do. But the boundaries is, I think, the biggest one for me. And that's something that I maybe am not as good at because my work the boundaries are pretty fuzzy. And so that's something that I'm constantly trying to get better at. Okay, I know we only have 1 minute left. I mean, this has been really fun. And so I know we have, like, lots and lots of other questions, both in the chat and in the questions y'all submitted. So we'll put our heads together and think about, like, maybe we do another one of these in the future, or do another one on a specific topic or something like that. But I also just wanted to give each of us a chance to talk about if there's anything. We'll send a follow-up email out afterwards, but Anna, Lizzie, are there specific things coming up for either one of you, or more information about where folks can find out more about you?
I would say for me, my website, annabeyang.com, I've got links to, like, everything. I write on Medium, I write on Substack, I have a newsletter, I'm on LinkedIn. So you can go to that and find me. I love connecting and communicating with people. You can send me a DM on LinkedIn if you have a question. And like Sarah said, we'll do some kind of follow-up as well for the questions we didn't get to.
For me, the easiest place to find me and everything that I do is freelancemagic.co. I'm going to send you all my onboarding document in the follow-up email. But if you want kind of all of the templates I use and all of the documents that I use in that process, like checklists, etc., it's in Workflow Wizard, which is one of my products. I put a link to it in the chat, and that's just got every single template that I use for onboarding and during the client process. It's got email scripts, etc., in there. Totally customizable, so you can add your own logo, etc. That might be useful after this discussion. So otherwise, freelancemagic.co. I'm also on LinkedIn, just Lizzie Davey, open to DMs and any questions that you might have as well.
And I'll drop my website link in the chat. I have I write a regular blog. I have a podcast and a Substack. And then I am running a New Year planning workshop in January. So you'll see a link to that on my homepage. This is literally the first time I've said it out loud, so y'all are the first to know that that's happening. But yeah, keep in touch. And like I said, I think we'll put our heads together and think about if there's an opportunity to do something like this again in 2024. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. It's so good to see so many people here.
Yeah, this was super fun. All right. Bye, y'all.